Welcome to the Edges of Lean. I'm Bella Engelbach, and in this podcast we explore the human and creative side of lean thinking, unusual places where lean thinking is practiced. We meet people who are practicing continuous improvement in many different flavors and styles. So come along with me on a journey to the edges of lean. Episode 60, Continuous Improvement and the Art of Business with Fiona Valentine. On this podcast, we've talked a lot about what continuous improvers have to learn from artists and about how and why we can't practice continuous improvement without building our skills for creativity. Fiona Valentine is an artist who works right at that intersection of art, creativity, and business. She helps artists learn how to sell their art, and she helps business people tap into their creativity. And she knows a thing or two about lean thinking as well. Fiona Valentine, welcome to the Edges of Lean.
Thank you, Bella. It's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to talking all things lean and art.
Lean and art, and thank you so much for being here to talk about that. As my listeners know, I'm very interested in the relationship of creativity to lean thinking. And you have such an interesting take that I think is the opposite of where many of us are coming from. So could you tell us about yourself, what you're doing now, and how did you get into that way of working?
It's been a long and winding road. I'm an artist and a business coach for artists, and I also work as a creative coach for businesses. So as an artist married to a lean specialist, there's been a lot of conversation in our house about art, about lean, and just seeing all the overlaps and my own personal journey of just discovering how core creativity is to being human, whether you're an artist or whether you're a baker or a landscaper or a manufacturer or a business owner. Doesn't matter what your career is, that creativity is absolutely core. So looking at ways that people implementing Lean Six Sigma programs need to unlock the creativity of their people, and the lessons I was learning working as an artist and teaching other people how to paint and seeing where people were getting stuck with these beliefs that they're not creative or things like that. It's really been a developing journey, and I love making that connection between art and business because I think the creative element is such an important thing that we need to help each other to unlock so we can reach our potential.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more on that. And so can you tell us a little bit about your art? So you're a painter.
That's right. I'm a painter and I work in several mediums, watercolor, acrylic, and oil. I also love drawing, and I'm really drawn to landscape. I love nature. So whether it's the big vistas or whether it's zeroing in on birds, flowers, the small details, anything to do with natural beauty just really delights me. I love the experience of being outside, like taking walks, and I like translating that to the canvas in a way that just brings a sense of joy and beauty, just our everyday life. I think we need that, and so I enjoy the process, but I also enjoy the result, the value that it brings to workspaces, living spaces, all of that sort of thing. So I paint, but I also have taught many people to draw and to paint, and these days I work particularly with artists, helping them to set up a business. As creatives, we're entrepreneurs, and also working with businesses and helping them to unlock the creativity of their teams. So the art making really led to this balance between my love for art and my love for teaching. I have a teaching background and a business background, and so that I love the way they all come together, and I get to do all these different aspects of things that just light me up.
That's really terrific, because I think that that even for people who have in their life, in their non-business life, they have some aspect of creativity. It's often sort of kept separate from work, right? So at work, I'm going to do my work, and I may go off and do this very creative thing. I may paint on the weekends or or compose or, do something else that is artistic in nature, that is really expressing creativity, resulting in, in something physical or something that can be shared. But there is this sense, I think, that that's not for work unless you're in a creative business. So why do you think that is? Why do we have, many of us, that sense that these things are supposed to be separated?
I think there's probably a whole lot of things going on there. And some of it is just we've become used to referring to certain kinds of creativity as creative. And we're forgetting that there's a lot of other kinds of creativity that we're not using that label for, even though that's what they are. So for all those people who are doing their art on the side and thinking of that as creative, they're not realizing that just like going to the gym means you develop strength and you speed up your metabolism and you just bring an energy to all of your work, the same thing's happening with your creativity. Just because you labeled it creative when you were home painting on the weekend, what's happening in your brain means that those connections between all the diverse ways of thinking that different parts of our brain engage in, you're learning to bring them together because the painting process, the art process does that. But then when you go to work, your brain is still using those connections. It's using that confidence, that ability to, there's so many things going on. One of them is confusion endurance. That was a term I learned from Michael Gelb, who wrote How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. And confusion endurance is that strength to persevere with confusion, that horrible feeling of, I've never done this before, I don't know where this is going, I'm not good at this, just the discomfort. And if you've forgotten what that feels like, just try writing your name with your non-dominant hand and you'll remember real quick how bad it feels. If you're dealing with a team implementing continuous improvement, your team are going to be feeling this all over the place. And if some of them have a creative practice on the side, they're going to have more of this endurance, this ability to push through the discomfort, the uncomfortable conversations, the feeling I don't know what I'm doing, and realize that it's going to get better, it's going to improve with repetition, and they're confident they're going to come out the other side with a solution because they're doing it all the time in their creative practice on the side. So it's really, really interesting how broad the creative process is. And I think a big part of it is learning to use many different kinds of thinking and to understand ourselves enough to also understand the stages of a project, how to move from idea to finished outcome and all of the different phases along the way. So developing that kind of creativity has endless applications for every industry, really. So to answer your question, I think part of it is that it's this thinking where we've just become a little bit too narrow in our ideas of creativity. And interestingly, 50% of people don't think that they're creative, which is absolutely untrue. 100% of humans are creative, but perhaps they haven't recognized it. Perhaps they just haven't developed it because, like anything else, any other potential, it's got to be recognized, it's got to be developed, and that takes practice, that takes time. So if you're requiring people to engage, to move through change, to come up with ideas, to problem solve, all of that sort of thing, but they're thinking, oh yeah, but I'm not creative. I don't have a creative bone in my body. I can't even draw stick figures. All these sort of things we tell ourselves. It's going to be really hard to come up with the creative goods if you don't think you've innately got them. But when you understand that 100% of humans are creative, you are much more likely to be willing to engage with the process. If you've already engaged with the process through art making, you'll already have that confidence, but everybody else needs that confidence too.
And I think it is interesting that we do define creativity narrowly for ourselves, right? So
we do.
For some people it is, well, I'm not creative because I can't paint, or I can't draw, or I can't play music, or I can't, I can't do whatever it is. And other people will say, well, I'm not creative because I'm not an ideator. But ideation, for like playing the violin, is only one part of creativity. That's right. And so I think that we do have these, we've kind of created a definition for ourselves. And sometimes I think, particularly in sort of the lean continuous improvement, especially when it's coming out of, and I hate to say this, engineering, which should be very creative, there is this idea that creativity is sort of this wild, uncontrolled thing that we don't want to allow too much of it in, right? Because we might end up with too many ideas, too many choices. We've lean people, we like tools that help us choose and decide and make decisions and move forward. And we're not as comfortable sometimes in those situations, which are about, we're comfortable with doing an experiment, but then decide, how we get to that experiment is sometimes hard for us. What are all the different choices that we could have in order to decide what to experiment? And that can be scary. So
yes, it can. Yes. And so recognizing that we need a broader definition, and that creativity has many different forms, many different stages, many different aspects, and that really we need all of them. And also understanding that creativity isn't an undisciplined, wild thing. You can have too many ideas, but that's part of it. It's part of the process, isn't it? That we filter and we select. And so when you're not limiting creativity because you're scared that it's going to just get out of control, but you're learning how to control it. Then some really interesting things open up, even recognizing that just sticking at the task can be really counterproductive. Stepping away from the task can actually free your creativity to engage in problem solving, because it flips into a different zone. It starts making connections between these diverse thoughts, memories, experiences, aspects of thinking, and comes up with solutions. So staring at the computer screen and just persevering or staying on the job without taking a quick walk, having a glass of water, a quick chat with someone, or just doing nothing, letting the sun shine on your skin for a few minutes, can actually be a highly creative, highly productive part of the whole process. And when we let go of some of these fears about creativity and start to actually understand what goes on, we can be efficient, but we can also do that in a very creative way that cooperates with our brains, which are amazing things.
And that's so interesting, because there is this other pull that we have on us at the moment, as people are trying to understand, well, how do I manage remote workers, right? Because not everybody's going back to the office, and we are moving into very much this remote working world and a hybrid working world. And so managers in some cases are really concerned about, are people putting in the hours, and are they putting in the hours on fingers on laptop? But as you just said, if the work requires some creativity, some new connection to be made, sitting in front of the laptop's not always good to do it, right? So in fact, it probably won't. You stepping away is going to be necessary, and then that creates a whole new parameter of how do I manage in this situation that I think people need to think about.
Exactly. And if you've got good measurements for outcomes and progress in place, then you can really, I think, relax on a lot of that and recognize that just fingers on the laptop is not necessarily the best measure of the person being productive, because that kind of creative stepping away doesn't necessarily mean workshopping, free conversation, experimentation. It might just mean 5 or 10 minutes, and the change of scene, the getting off the screen, has allowed your brain to go, oh, that's what I need to do next in that project. Or that's how I should answer that email. It can be very simple and very practical, but our brains do it. And once you notice it, it really gives you the ability to not exhaust your brain with continual staring at a screen, but to get to that point where you've got something to solve and know that, okay, if I go away and throw the laundry on, or if I go away and take a 5-minute walk, I can still be working, because in a sense I'm freeing my brain to actually just solve the next thing or come up with an idea. And once you notice that's happening, you have to have notebooks everywhere because you start realizing that solutions and ideas and things like that are coming to you at random times. It seems like random times, but it's often just as you step away or change into this different mode.
Right. So, and that is when what we think of as being the subconscious part of the brain can start to make connections that we might have been trying to force, or that we might not see ourselves. Yes. So you work with two types of clients who I imagine think of themselves as being really different. So you work with artists who want to start a business based on their art, and you work with business people who want to bring more creativity and innovation into their work. How different are they really? I mean, what are the big similarities and the big differences between your two groups of clients without giving anybody's secrets away?
Well, I think the big thing is that we need both. The artists and creatives need business skills, and businesses need to understand the creative side of their team. So unlocking that creativity of a team is an art. And there are different ways you can do it. The way that I do it is by using drawing. So I teach an art of innovation workshop where in 2 hours, I show teams how to draw a beautiful classical drawing, even if you can't draw stick figures. And that process has so much of the confusion endurance, that it's about skills, not talent. It's about a process. It's reminding yourself how vulnerable change and creativity can feel. And all of those things are really helpful for a team, remembering they are creative. We're all creative, affirming that, bringing empathy and compassion to the process. Putting your ideas out there where someone can see them in a drawing can feel very vulnerable. And we feel very vulnerable when we're in a process of change or we're learning new things. And remembering that and bringing empathy to the process is very important. For artists, they know the creative side, but they haven't necessarily expanded their theory of creativity into recognizing that business skills, sales and marketing, organization, those are an extension of your creativity. So with the artists that I work with over my 90-day profitable artist method, I'm taking them through a process of building a website, getting clarity on, first of all, what they want to make, what they love to do, how much time they want to spend, how much money they want to make, helping them define their ideal customer and then their highest value offer. After we've done those things, then with the practical side, website, email list, social media optimization, all of that sort of thing. So they're the things that generally business know. But for business, doing the drawing workshop really helps them to, as a team, interact with this idea of creativity and affirm the fact that 100% of humans are creative and remind themselves of what confusion endurance looks and feels like so they can support each other in engaging in change management or, a Lean Six Sigma program of some sort, because it's at that core, you don't have the control over other people bringing their creativity to the process. You need them to, but you really have to give them that confidence that they are creative and encourage them to willingly bring all of themselves to this process. And then the outcomes can be extraordinary. But if you're trying to implement tools, values, and behaviors with people who don't think they really can contribute because they're really not the creative people, then you're really starting off missing the core, missing the heart of this program because people are not understanding themselves fully enough. So that's kind of the two sides. I see that the art skills or the creative skills and the business skills work together in both of these arenas.
Well, for the business people, especially for the leaders, what do you see is sort of the hardest thing for them to change?
Well, I mean, change itself is hard, isn't it?
Changes, but of course it is, yeah. But yeah.
So maybe the hardest thing is to think that this is worth spending time on. Time is money. So we can get really efficient and think that, well, we just need to get on with it. But just going that little bit slower and realizing, okay, but what's it going to take for us to get on with it? It's going to take a team of people who believe that they've got something to offer and who don't bail as soon as this feels uncomfortable. You're really prepping everybody to see that, look, we understand, we anticipate this is going to feel uncomfortable. But as we go through the process and it becomes more familiar, we're going to get more and more efficient because this is the way the brain works. So I think it's one, recognizing that this is important. This is not some sort of arty-farty thing that has nothing to do with us efficient business people. This is really core to your team and getting the most out of your team in their, not only their problem solving skills, but in their collaboration together and in their willingness to go on this journey of change with you. If they're bailing because it feels uncomfortable and we've always done it this way before, why do we need to do it this way? And, I'm just not good at, this is how I work. All of these kind of things that crop up when you're trying to get a whole organization to move forward. This is a tool that can really, really help because you are affirming people that you believe in them, they've got what it takes, and that you're going to get through the discomfort together, and you're going to go at a pace that allows everybody to catch up, because the process is not going to be the same as this. Once we've established this and we're all comfortable with it, it's going to feel very different than it did in the beginning. So I think that's really the biggest thing, is to recognize that this is an important part of efficiency.
But it feels so hard in the beginning as people are learning that new way of thinking and of being. And I really love what you're saying about, just getting used to being uncomfortable, because when they're at that learning edge, it's always going to feel uncomfortable. And for a company to be continually competitive and continually meet the changing needs of the world, they're always going to have some part of the organization out in that uncomfortable space. So I just love the idea of people sort of going through these workshops and experiencing that discomfort. That what does perseverance, endurance feel like? Creating that empathy, but at the same time, when they're done with it, they actually have something beautiful that they can enjoy.
They've got this incredible outcome that is a tangible, visible reminder or declaration. You're creative, that you've got the potential. All you need are the skills, and learning the skills. We're kind of condensing this whole journey of improvement, and the discomfort at the beginning, that I don't know what I'm doing, the learning the skills, persevering, and coming out to a beautiful outcome. We're condensing this experience into an hour and a half or 2-hour workshop online. So people can do it all over the place. You can have a diverse team around the country or across the globe, and they can all work on this project together, get the outcome, and that then becomes a common experience, a common language that just encapsulates this whole longer journey that may take months or years for the organization to move through. But the lessons of vulnerability, of confusion, endurance, of skills, of creative potential, and of moving towards an outcome and enjoying, the process may feel uncomfortable at times, but it's going to get easier. All of those lessons stick. And in fact, the way that I show people how to draw, I encourage them to continue the practice as a 5 or 10 minute daily discipline, because it's like going to the gym. It's building these neural pathways for this diverse, creative way of thinking in your brain. It's strengthening them. And it's also kind of giving you a timeout from the screen, a timeout where, as you're drawing, your brain is freewheeling, and it may be coming up with solutions for the other things that you're doing. So for that 5 or 10 minutes, it's a very powerful practice to incorporate into your regular routine.
Wow. And then when you're working with artists, where do they feel the most confusion, endurance? Where is it? Where's the sort of the hard learning place for them?
Well, they've probably already done it in their art making. And in fact, the confusion, endurance, the difficulty may have gone away to some degree in their creative process, in their art making process, but they've told themselves, well, I don't have, business skills. So doing business planning, looking at their pricing, looking at their bookkeeping, looking at tech skills, organizing their website, their email list, all of that sort of stuff. There can be a resentment that they even need to do these things, and a belief that they can't do these things. And of course, because they haven't done them, they're not good at them yet. So it feels bad. And so that just reinforces this loop. I'm not good at this, instead of seeing, no, that's just the way that skills work. And you have developed confusion endurance. Now just bring that endurance to learning the business side of things. And what feels overwhelming and uncomfortable right now is going to get more and more doable. It's going to get easier. You're going to get faster. What takes you 2 days is going to take you, 30 minutes down the track. You're just going to get so much better at it. And I'm there to sort of hold their hand, help them see the big picture, help them see the next step, and to just make it easier to know what to focus on and not just get lost in the weeds.
It's funny to me when, and by funny I don't mean humorous, but interesting, because I know business people who feel the same way. They feel as if, my business idea, which was a very creative business idea, that's what it's all about. And that feeling of resentment. Why do I have to make a business plan? People should just flock to buy my thing, right? So I think that there are business people who feel exactly the same way. They know that it's very hard to understand. Well, there's a set of disciplines that you need to learn and follow, and yes, they're uncomfortable and they're not the way you're used to thinking about things, but if you learn them, they'll actually provide a nice, stable place for you to stand on as you move forward with your business.
Yeah, they'll really serve you. And it's been interesting being married to Mike, who's been in the lean world for a long time, and him being able to talk to me about lean tools. It's been fantastic. Many artists view themselves as creatives. They're messy, they're disorganized, which actually isn't true. But bringing, 5S, a tool like that to organize, he helped me work through that in my studio, and to have a place for everything and labels. And I can't tell you how fantastic it is to the creative, how great it is for the creative process to not lose the flow because you can't find that tube of paint, but to really have order. It's great.
I can totally imagine that. And then I think that, the other thing that when you and I were talking a little bit before, one of the things that really struck me was the idea of, doing studies, for example. So when you are aiming for a specific effect or a specific, a specific way that you would like a painting or another piece of art to go, that you might take time to do smaller experiments, right? That you might mix some paint or use different textures, or do a drawing or do several drawings before you actually put a brush to canvas or whatever medium you're using. And that is not unlike what in lean we're asking people to do with learning to solve problems, right? It's not about you're going to come up with the final solution, the masterpiece, the first time around. What you're going to do is you're going to say, well, I'd like the sky to be this, this kind of blue, and I would like the texture to be like this. Well, now how do I get that? I've got to learn that. I have to practice that. Maybe along the way, I have, what Bob Ross would call happy accidents and things that I would learn from and keep and use another time. But at the same time, you don't get to perfect or, the thing that you wanted without going through these learning cycles.
Exactly. And Mike made me laugh the other day. We were talking about PDCA, the Plan, Do, Check, Act, and how that having systems, standardization is the thing that keeps that from rolling back down the hill. And he just made the comment that there is a difference between continuous improvement and instantaneous perfection. It just made me laugh because it's so obvious, but we do think like that, don't we? We do want to get to the end immediately. We get very impatient, and when we can be patient, experiment, but have boundaries on that, when the experimentation time's over, now it's time to evaluate and move on. When we slow down and expect there to be iterations of the whole thing, there's so much joy in the journey, whether you're making art or making a business. Those steps can each be enjoyable in their own right. It's the frustration of having to get to the end immediately, I think, that keeps us stressed and just not enjoying the whole thing. And I think that the whole thing can be a lot more enjoyable when we slow down and we recognize each step of the pathway. And I think when we're in that more relaxed state, we're bringing our best to our business or to our art making.
Yeah. And I think that's, it doesn't matter if you're doing art or in business or making podcasts or what, whatever it is, that there is that expectation that many of us have, and sometimes it's given to us by our bosses or maybe by our customers, that things are supposed to be perfect and we're supposed to have solutions. And in Lean, we talk about, I don't know if your husband has talked about this, we talk about countermeasures, right? So we talk about a countermeasure rather than a solution, because a countermeasure means that we have learned enough to solve the problem for now, but we know that things are going to change, that, the direction of the wind will change, that the customer will change, but there is so much pressure these days to be perfect all the time, so you don't, and we're kind of hard on each other in
we can
so many
be,
respects.
and just recognizing that life, we're continually coming up with solutions that are good enough for now, and we're not afraid to change them. We're not just looking for that one perfect fix that's going to last forever, which I tend to naturally do. And I have to remind myself that this is not about, plan, do, check, act once. This is a process, and it's okay if I keep finding ways of refining that. And it's okay if each one of those isn't perfect, but we're moving on.
Yeah. And when we get to good standard, then we only hold on to it until it's time for something better.
If it's not broken, we're not going to fix it.
Fiona, I love to talk with my guests about what they see in education. And you're in Australia, right?
That's
and
right.
I'm wondering, in the educational system in Australia, are pupils encouraged to be both creative and academic? Are they pushed into one role or the other?
I think there is more openness to both and seeing both. But when we get down to the nitty gritty of, okay, what am I going to do for a career? How am I going to get enough points in, my exams or whatever to get into something that's going to be a career that's going to make enough to live on? That's where I think things get a bit unhelpful. And I think a lot of people are steered away from the arts. And there's, I think, grown an idea that artists need to be represented by a gallery, that they need someone else to either take them on board or open the gates for them or give them permission or something. And I think that the whole idea of being an artist entrepreneur is missing from the conversation. And there are a lot of reasons for that. But I get students coming into my Profitable Artist Method program to do my 90-day coaching on setting up their business. And they've just done a fine art degree. And they have no idea how to operate a business. And so then they're constantly in the position of looking for grants or looking for a gallery to pick them up, instead of recognizing you can be freelance, you can be independent, and this is how you go about it. Now, that's not everybody is not being told that, but in a lot of cases, people are not being told that. So yeah, I would encourage anybody who's starting out on that art journey, that if you're really interested in being a maker, then don't forget the sales and marketing skills too, because if you can put those together, then the world's your oyster. You've got so many opportunities when you're able to be independent, and you may want to work with a gallery. You may want to take on a project. You may even want to receive a grant. But if you're independent and can manage your income for yourself, that's a much better place to be in. You are in business as an artist. And I encourage people to do that and think that way and build those skills.
And that's so interesting, because I'm thinking, I think that's true about a lot of other potential ways of working. And I'm thinking, even in the case of, I know the medical system is a bit different in Australia, not as different as it is from the States as some other countries. But I've heard the same thing about physicians coming out of medical training and wanting to, for example, go into solo practice, but that's a business, right? And they have received absolutely no training on how to run a business. in addition to being a doctor, or even somebody who is doing a different type of art, someone who is potentially could be a musician or a music teacher or even a tattoo artist, right? I had a guest on the show, an early guest on the show, who talked about how she helped someone from a lean perspective, help them with their tattoo business, it was a piercing business, because they the business side was just not as apparent.
Yes, exactly. It's a whole nother skill set. And so if you can put the business skill set and the creative skill set and start to see that there are a lot more overlaps than we may have thought, I think wonderful things open up in lots of industries.
Yeah. And then there's something that goes the other way. So you could almost imagine a business that was able to do that, hiring a resident artist, right? Because there's so much that a resident artist could do in a business, from helping people be more creative to helping to document what's been happening in the business in a completely different way from the way it usually is.
Yes. And one of those ways, Rebecca Seal talks about in her book, Solo. This book is all for, solo workers working at home alone. But she makes some very interesting observations out of her research about environments that are almost sterile and because we're within lean, there's a lot of efficiency. We can be guilty of doing this, where it's all about functionality. And she said, research has shown that bringing in things like art that we have chosen and plants, things like that, into the working environment, they actually increase our productivity, which is fascinating. Enriched environments are very productive. So balancing that with all of the true and very important things that we know about lean, I think those are exciting combinations. So yeah, I think there's lots that artists can bring to business.
Right. So we'll just have to work on making that happen. I personally think every at least big enough organization who can afford it needs a sociologist and an artist and a philosopher and a play therapist, like they have in children's hospitals. And I think if you had all of those people working in your company, you would have no problem with employee engagement, provided the managers were behaving themselves.
I love it. Very good. Yes. Well, if you're looking to start down that path in a simple way, you can check out my website, fionavalentine.com, and the Art of Innovation workshop, which is designed for businesses to do online and bring their team to be able to engage in this drawing workshop and talk about all the ways that unpacking your creativity can train your brain for creativity and innovation, particularly in your lean programs and the implementation of that.
It's so needed, because you can't solve problems without creativity. It's one thing to look what another company has done and adopt what they've done, but when it comes to your own company's problems, your own situations, your own unique customers, you will have to use creativity. And what you're talking about really unleashing everybody's creativity can only be good for the organization.
It's key to the success of all of that happening. So it's a good place to start.
Fiona Valentine, what would be your one piece of advice for a young person starting out nowadays?
If they're starting out in wanting to learn about drawing and painting, I would say recognize that your creativity is innate, but the skills to draw and paint can be learned, and that skills are not going to limit your creativity. They're going to give it wings. And if you decide that you love the drawing and painting so much that you want to turn it into a career, then I would look first at equipping yourself with those sales and marketing skills so that you can be an independent entrepreneur. And then whatever you do with your career after that, at your core, you've got something very powerful and very strong where you've taken charge of your creativity, both on the making side to learn those skills and on the business side to learn those skills. So that would be my advice, that anything is possible. You've got an enormous amount of potential. you've got enough talent and creativity to make beautiful art and a beautiful business. What you need are skills. So focus on getting those skills and enjoy the journey. There's no hurry.
Fiona Valentine, it's been such a pleasure spending time with you and thinking about creativity. And for those of you who are listening and not watching on YouTube, Fiona has a beautiful painting behind her. And I'm just wondering, just before we close, could you describe that painting for those people who are listening?
It's a very simple scene of stillness, big, beautiful sky, sun very low, near a lake. So huge reflections of the sky, and just a very narrow peninsula of, or just the edge of the lake where you can see trees and their reflections. I'm a big lover of open spaces and sky and water reflections. And that's all reflected in this with really purple and pink and very soft sort of pearlescent colors.
I think that really reflects who you are as a person. So thank you. Thank you for traveling with me to the edges of Lean.
Thank you for having me. Delight to have this conversation.
This is Bella Engelbart, and I'd like to thank Fiona Valentine for being my guest on the Edges of Lean. How do you express your creativity? What are your challenges and successes with creativity and lean thinking? We'd love to hear from you. Find Fiona at fionavalentine.com or on LinkedIn. Find me on LinkedIn or at leanforhumans.com or comment wherever you watch or listen. Hey, subscribe to the podcast and tell a friend about the Edges of Lean. Please join me in exploring more of the Edges of Lean. There's a lot to learn, and check out my friends in the Lean Communicators community at leancommunicators.com. You'll find more podcasts and videos with lots of great new content every week. The Edges of Lean is written and produced by Bella Engelbart with support from Podcast Inc. This is a Lean for Humans production.